It started like any ordinary school day: children laughing, teachers calling roll, and parents waving goodbye at the gates. But what happened next would haunt an entire town for nearly 3 decades. 27 years ago, a group of cheerful elementary school students filed into a yellow school bus for what should have been a short field trip to the local nature reserve. They were never seen again. The bus, the driver, and all 23 children vanished without a single trace. No crash, no witnesses. No calls, just silence. Authorities searched for weeks. Theories flooded in. Some said it was an accident covered up. Others whispered of something more mysterious. But over time, the case faded into cold files, and the town was left with unanswered questions and grieving families. Among those left behind was Clara Morgan, a mother who refused to give up on her son. She spent years chasing leads, showing pictures, knocking on doors till the world stopped listening. But last week, everything changed. While cleaning out her late father's attic, Clara came across a dusty photo tucked behind an old map. At first glance, it looked ordinary: just a group of school children posing before a forest trail. But then she noticed something, a detail so small, so specific, it made her heart race. It was something that didn't belong, something that shouldn't have been in that photo in 1998. And with it, Clara was about to open a door to secrets the town had buried deep. Clara stared at the photo, her hands trembling as she leaned in closer. In the far corner, nearly hidden behind a tree, was a man, blurred, almost like a shadow, but his face didn't match anyone from the school staff. He wasn't part of the group, she was sure of it. And what sent chills down her spine was the logo on his jacket. It was from a facility that hadn't opened until 2004, 6 years after the photo was supposedly taken. Clara knew this wasn't just a coincidence. This photo had been hidden for a reason. Desperate for answers, she took the photo to the local historian, Mr. Reeves, who had been living in the town his whole life. As he examined it, his face turned pale. "I've seen this symbol before," he whispered, "but not in connection to any school trip." He didn't say much else, only warned her to be careful. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She dug through every box in the attic, every document her father had kept. Old maps, journals, receipts from places she didn't recognize. One name kept coming up: Ashridge Grounds. It wasn't a place she remembered, but it was scribbled repeatedly in her father's handwriting. Clara started to wonder, had her father known something all along? Had he been part of the original search? Or worse, was he covering something up? She wasn't sure yet, but deep down, she felt that this wasn't just about a missing class anymore. This was about something much bigger, and someone didn't. Wanted found. Clara drove out to the edge of town the next morning, following a worn-out map she'd found tucked into her father's journal. It led her to a place that didn't appear on any GPS: just dense woods and a rusted sign barely hanging. On its hinges, Ashridge Grounds, no trespassing. The gate was chained, but someone had recently broken it. The chain lay in the dirt, fresh boot prints leading inside. Her heart pounded. She wasn't alone in searching for answers. Back in town, she met with Elena Rivera, the sister of another missing student. Elena had moved away years ago, trying to escape the pain. But she'd never stopped wondering what happened to her little brother. When Clara showed her the photo, Elena gasped. "That man, T. He came to our house the day before the trip," said. "He was part of the school board. My parents didn't question it." Clara's breath caught. What if he'd been scouting the kids, watching them? Meanwhile, local reporter Jonah Dell was following a quiet lead of his own. He'd covered the original disappearance as a rookie. Now, older and hardened, Jonah had recently received an anonymous envelope with photos similar to Clara's. Different children, same man, same symbol. Across different towns, different years. He was starting to believe this wasn't an isolated case, As Clara dug deeper, she started noticing strange things, her phone glitching, her car alarm going off at odd hours. Someone was watching, and whoever had hidden the truth for 27 years was clearly willing to keep it that way. Rain tapped against Clara's windshield as she sat parked outside the edge of Ashridge grounds, staring into the shadows of the forest beyond. The silence was thick, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. She gripped the old photo in her hand, the man's blurred face now burned into her memory. Every lead she had pointed back here, every strange coincidence, every lost child. She stepped out, flashlight in hand, heart thudding hard in her chest. Deeper in the woods, the trees grew tighter, the air colder. She followed the boot prints, now faint and damp from the rain. Suddenly, the ground dipped and opened into what looked like the remains of an old structure, half buried and overgrown. A concrete door, nearly camouflaged by vines, stood slightly ajar. Her flashlight flickered, casting long shadows across the mossy floor. She hesitated, then stepped in. Inside, the air smelled of damp earth and rust. Along the walls were hooks, papers, names faded but familiar. Children's names, her son's name. Clara's breath caught. She wasn't just close, she was inside. Whatever this was, behind her, a sound echoed. Footsteps, slow, measured, not hers. She turned off the light, heart racing, and pressed against the wall. Miles away, Jonah was receiving a message from his anonymous source. A set of coordinates, Ashridge grounds, time-stamped just minutes ago. And in another town, Elena's apartment had been broken into, but nothing was stolen. Only her copy of the photo was gone. Someone knew they were getting too close. Clara held her breath as the footsteps grew louder, then suddenly stopped. The silence pressed in. She could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. Just as she reached for her phone to text Elena, a beam of light swept across the room. She ducked behind a crumbling metal cabinet, biting her lip to stay quiet. A voice echoed through the tunnel low, calm to calm. "You're not supposed to be here." It wasn't a threat. It sounded like a warning. Then the door creaked, shut behind him. Back in town, Jonah sped through back roads toward the coordinates, rain streaking down his windshield. The closer he got, the more his phone buzzed, calls dropped, GPS froze. But just before the signal cut completely, a final message came through. It was a photo. Another group of children, different from the ones who vanished years ago. But this photo wasn't old, was recent, taken in the last month. Jonah's blood ran cold. This wasn't a cold case reopening. It was still happening. At the same time, Elena received a voice note from a blocked number. It was barely audible, distorted, but she could make out a child's voice whispering her name. "Elena, help us." Then, static. She stared at the phone in disbelief. Her brother had been gone for 27 years. Was it a sick prank? Or had someone kept these children hidden all this time? Inside the underground room, Clara stepped forward and found a locked door marked Sector B behind it. She heard laughter. Children's laughter. Clara stood frozen outside the door marked Sector B, her heart racing. The sound of children's laughter felt wrong, to cheerful, to distant, like it didn't belong in a place this cold and forgotten. She gripped a rusted lever and pulled. The lock clanked open, the heavy door groaning as it swung inward. Bright light flooded the narrow hall beyond, revealing a clean, sterile corridor that didn't match the decayed outer structure. Monitors lined the walls. Footage played on repeat: schoolyards, buses, classrooms. Some were decades old. Others looked like they were from yesterday. She stepped forward slowly, then stopped as a door at the end of the hall opened. A man walked out. The same blurred face from the photo, now older but unmistakable. "You weren't supposed to find this," he said. Not angry, just tired. They weren't taken. They were chosen. Clara's voice shook. Chosen for what? He gestured toward the monitors. A controlled environment. Observation, learning without outside interference. Clara couldn't believe what she was hearing. You kidnapped them. Suddenly, the children she'd heard appeared laughing, playing, healthy. They didn't seem afraid. A young boy stepped forward. Clara's knees buckled. Mom? It was her son. He hadn't aged a day. Before she could speak, alarms blared. Jonah had arrived and tripped the facility's security. Lights flashed. The man whispered, "You've disrupted the balance. We can't undo this." Then, without warning, the screens went black. Doors slammed shut. And Clara realized this wasn't just about finding the missing. It was about stopping something far from over. The walls shook as the hidden facility went into full lockdown. Clara gripped her son's hand. Her eyes locked on his. He hadn't aged, hadn't changed. 27 years had passed in the world above, but for him, it felt like a regular day. Jonah peered through the smoke, grabbing Clara and pulling her toward a maintenance exit he'd found on the map. The children followed, confused but trusting. The man in the corridor didn't chase them. He just watched, silent, as if he knew it was all about to collapse. They escaped into the night just before the entire entrance caved in behind them, sealing away whatever secrets still remained below. Emergency services arrived hours later. But by then, the ground had already shifted, swallowing any trace of the underground structure. Officials called it an unstable sinkhole. The truth never made it into the news. In the days that followed, DNA tests confirmed what CLA